Captain Sarah Chun adjusted her helmet as the Apache helicopter cut through the morning desert air at 200 feet. The radio crackled with routine chatter from base operations while she scanned the horizon through her targeting system. Her co-pilot, Marcus, shifted in the front seat, checking weapon systems for what should have been another standard reconnaissance patrol along the disputed border. The sun painted the rocky terrain below in harsh shadows and blinding light. Sarah had flown this route dozens of times over the past 6 months, each mission blending into the next with mechanical precision. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, adjusting altitude and heading while monitoring multiple displays simultaneously. Then the radar warning receiver screamed to life. Multiple contacts approaching fast from the northeast. Fighter aircraft. Sarah's pulse remained steady as she processed the information, her training taking over completely. Marcus swore under his breath as the contacts resolved on their screen. 4 jets, moving at high speed, directly toward their position. Ground control came through the radio with urgency cutting through the static. Command, we have multiple hostile aircraft inbound to your position. Recommend immediate evasive action and return to base. Sarah smiled slightly, an expression that would have surprised anyone who knew her reputation for calm professionalism. She keyed her microphone with deliberate slowness. Roger, ground control. We see them. Before we continue this intense aerial encounter, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've witnessed similar acts of military courage in your area. The fighter jets closed distance rapidly, their superior speed evident as they approached the lone helicopter hanging in the desert sky. The lead fighter pilot's voice cut through the radio frequency with arrogant confidence. Apache pilot, you are outgunned and outnumbered. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. Sarah banked the helicopter sharply to the left, using a rocky outcrop as temporary cover while the jets screamed overhead at supersonic speeds. Marcus gripped his restraints as the aircraft pitched violently. What's the plan, Captain? Those jets can outrun us by 300 miles per hour. Sarah's eyes tracked the fighter formation as they executed a wide turn to come around for another pass. The pilots were flying textbook intercept patterns, probably fresh from advanced training schools where they learned that helicopters were sitting ducks against fast movers. Their overconfidence radiated through every precise maneuver. She keyed the radio again, her voice carrying an odd note of amusement that made Marcus look back at her in surprise. Unknown aircraft, this is Apache 27. Thanks for the warning. The fighters spread into attack formation, each pilot no doubt calculating easy gun runs against the relatively slow helicopter. They had speed, altitude advantage, and firepower superiority. Everything their instructors had taught them suggested this engagement would be over in minutes. Sarah dropped the Apache even lower, skimming just above the desert floor, where heat shimmer created optical illusions and rocky terrain provided intermittent concealment. The fighter pilots would have to come down to her level to get clean shots, abandoning their primary advantages of speed and altitude. Her smile widened as she watched their formation adjust to meet this unexpected tactical choice. The first fighter dove toward them, cannon blazing as tracers streaked past the Apache's rotor disc. Sarah waited until the last possible second before pulling hard right, using a steep canyon wall to break the pilot's line of sight. The jet roared overhead, forced to pull up sharply to avoid the rocky terrain. Marcus monitored the radar display as the remaining 3 aircraft repositioned for coordinated attacks. They're setting up a box pattern, trying to trap us in the valley. Sarah, we need to climb out of here before they pin us down. But Sarah had already identified something the fighter pilots had missed in their tactical planning. The canyon system ahead contained a network of narrow passages that would force the jets to engage one at a time rather than as a coordinated unit. She pushed the Apache deeper into the rocky maze, her rotor wash kicking up clouds of dust and debris. The second fighter attempted a high-speed pass through the canyon, but the confined space limited his maneuverability. Sarah timed her movement perfectly, sliding the helicopter sideways behind a rock formation just as cannon fire chewed up the ground where they had been hovering moments before. Ground control's voice crackled with increasing urgency. Apache 27, your position is becoming untenable. Request immediate extraction to safe coordinates. Sarah's response carried that same mysterious confidence that had puzzled Marcus since the engagement began. Ground control, we're exactly where we need to be. The canyon amplified her words as the third fighter began his attack run, unaware that he was flying directly into the trap she had been methodically constructing. The third fighter pilot grew impatient with the Catan mouse game unfolding in the canyon below. He broke formation protocol, diving aggressively toward the Apache's last known position with his targeting system locked and ready. The narrow canyon walls rushed past his canopy as he committed to a gun run that would either end the engagement or trap him in the rocky maze. Sarah had anticipated this exact moment. She pulled the Apache into a hover behind a massive boulder, rotors barely clearing the rock face above. The jet pilot, focused on his attack run, didn't see the helicopter until he was already committed to his dive path with no room to maneuver. Marcus watched in fascination as Sarah began a maneuver he had never seen in any training manual. She lifted the Apache's nose high, using the main rotor's downwash to create a massive dust cloud that completely obscured the canyon floor. The fighter pilot, suddenly flying blind through the debris cloud, pulled up hard to avoid ground impact. The fourth pilot watched his wingman's frantic climb and keyed his radio with growing frustration. This helicopter pilot knows these canyons too well. We need to force her into open ground where we can use our speed advantage properly. But Sarah had already moved to the next phase of her plan. She emerged from the dust cloud in an unexpected position, having used the cover to relocate to higher ground where the canyon opened into a wider valley. The fighter pilots regrouped above, their fuel gauges beginning to show the cost of their extended low-altitude maneuvering. The wider valley should have been the fighter pilot's domain, but Sarah had chosen this terrain for reasons that would soon become apparent. She positioned the Apache at the valley's center, seemingly exposed and vulnerable as the four jets circled overhead like predators preparing for a coordinated strike. The lead pilot's voice carried renewed confidence as he coordinated the attack. All units, standard box formation. We'll hit her from 4 directions simultaneously. No more games in the canyons. Marcus checked his weapons systems nervously as the jets spread out to their attack positions. Sarah, they're going to hit us from all sides at once. We can't evade 4 simultaneous attacks in open ground. Sarah's hands moved across her controls with deliberate precision, adjusting systems that Marcus couldn't identify from his front seat position. Her voice remained unnaturally calm as she responded to ground control's repeated requests for status updates. Ground control beginning evasive maneuvers now. The first 2 fighters began their attack runs from opposite directions, their cannon systems armed and targeting computers locked onto the stationary helicopter. At this range, and with coordinated timing, missing would be nearly impossible. The remaining 2 jets prepared to follow immediately behind, ensuring no escape route remained open. Sarah waited until all 4 aircraft had committed to their attack vectors, their pilots focused entirely on their targeting displays and weapon systems. Then she keyed her radio with a sound that would haunt those pilots for years to come. She laughed. The laugh echoed through the radio frequencies with chilling confidence as Sarah executed a maneuver that defied everything the fighter pilots understood about helicopter capabilities. She pulled the Apache into a violent sideways slip, dropping altitude, while simultaneously spinning the aircraft around its vertical axis. The first 2 jets, committed to their attack runs, found their targeting solutions suddenly useless as the helicopter disappeared from their expected intercept point. Their cannon fire converged on empty air while Sarah used the Apache's unique ability to translate in any direction without changing her nose orientation. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the world spun around them, but Sarah's control inputs remained precise and calculated. She had transformed the helicopter into something the jet pilots had never encountered in their training scenarios, an aircraft that could move in directions their targeting computers couldn't predict. The third fighter pilot's voice cracked with disbelief as he watched the impossible display. How is she doing that? Helicopters can't maneuver like that at combat speeds. But Sarah was just beginning to reveal the extent of her capabilities. As the fourth jet dove toward their new position, she used the Apache's rotor system like a three-dimensional rudder, sliding the aircraft sideways through the air while maintaining perfect weapons tracking on the approaching fighter. The pilot found himself staring down the barrel of the Apache's chain gun as his own attack run brought him directly into Sarah's engagement envelope. For the first time since the engagement began, a fighter pilot was looking at his own death approaching at 30-millimeter intervals. The fourth fighter pilot yanked his stick hard left, abandoning his attack run as the Apache's chain gun tracked his movement with mechanical precision. Sarah held her fire, but the message was unmistakable. She could have destroyed him at any moment during his approach, yet chose to demonstrate restraint that spoke of absolute confidence in her tactical superiority. The lead pilot regrouped his formation at higher altitude, his voice tight with frustration and growing respect. All units, this pilot is not standard opposition. She's flying that helicopter like it's a fighter aircraft. Marcus finally understood what he was witnessing. Sarah wasn't just an experienced Apache pilot. She was operating on a level that transcended normal training parameters. Every maneuver flowed seamlessly into the next, creating a three-dimensional dance that turned their helicopter into an untouchable target. Ground control's transmissions reflected the confusion spreading through the command structure. Apache 27, please clarify your tactical status. Radar shows impossible flight profiles from your position. Sarah's response carried the same mysterious amusement that had marked her communications throughout the engagement. Ground control were demonstrating advanced rotorcraft capabilities. The fighter formation made another coordinated approach, but their pilots now flew with hesitation that hadn't existed minutes earlier. Each attack run ended the same way, with Sarah positioning the Apache exactly where she wanted it while the jets found themselves committed to predictable flight paths that she could counter with supernatural precision. The hunters had become the hunted without understanding how the roles had reversed. The fighter pilots found themselves in an unprecedented situation that no training scenario had prepared them for. Their fuel gauges showed critical levels after extended low-altitude combat maneuvering, while the Apache below seemed to operate with unlimited endurance and inexplicable tactical advantages. The second pilot's voice carried barely concealed panic as he reported to his flight leader. "Sir, we're approaching minimum fuel for safe return to base. This engagement is lasting far longer than projected." Sarah had calculated this moment from the beginning of the encounter. Fighter aircraft burned fuel at exponential rates during combat operations, especially when forced into extended low-altitude maneuvering. She had deliberately prolonged the engagement, using her helicopter's superior endurance to create a time pressure that would force critical decisions from her opponents. Marcus monitored their own fuel status and realized they could continue operations for hours while the jets faced immediate limitations. The tactical situation had shifted completely through patience and superior resource management rather than raw firepower. The lead pilot made the decision that Sarah had been waiting for. "All units, we need to end this engagement immediately. Coordinated attack, maximum aggression, then immediate departure for refueling." Sarah's response sent chills through the radio frequency as she demonstrated knowledge that should have been impossible for a helicopter pilot to possess. "Roger, fighters. Your fuel consumption at current power settings gives you approximately 8 minutes before minimum reserve requirements. Shall we continue?" The silence that followed spoke volumes about how completely she had outmaneuvered them. The four fighters descended in perfect formation for their final coordinated attack. Every pilot knowing this would be their last opportunity before fuel constraints forced withdrawal. Their approach carried the desperate precision of professionals who had been systematically outmaneuvered by an opponent they had initially dismissed. Sarah watched their descent with the calm attention of someone observing a predictable outcome. She had guided the entire engagement toward this exact moment, where the fighters would be forced into a high-commitment attack with no reserves for extended maneuvering. Marcus felt the tension building as all four aircraft lined up for simultaneous gun runs from different vectors. Even with Sarah's demonstrated abilities, avoiding four coordinated attacks seemed mathematically impossible. The Apache hovered in apparent vulnerability as cannon fire from multiple directions prepared to converge on their position. The lead pilot's voice carried grim determination as he coordinated the final assault. All units, weapons free. Full commitment on my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute. Four jets dove toward the lone helicopter with everything they had remaining, their pilots knowing that failure meant facing the impossible truth that a single Apache had defeated an entire fighter formation through superior tactics and mysterious knowledge. Sarah's hands moved across her controls with the fluidity of someone executing a plan that had been perfected through countless similar encounters. Her voice carried across the radio frequency with absolute certainty. Marcus, prepare for immediate acceleration to attack position. The moment of truth had arrived, and only Sarah knew how it would end. Sarah executed a maneuver that belonged in the history books of aerial combat. As the four fighters committed to their final attack runs, she pulled the Apache into a climbing spiral that used each jet's approach vector against the others, creating a three-dimensional maze where their own formation became a liability. The first fighter found his targeting solution blocked by his wingman's approach path. The second pilot pulled up sharply to avoid a collision with the third aircraft. The fourth jet, coming from the opposite direction, suddenly faced the impossible choice between firing through his own formation or abandoning his attack entirely. Marcus watched in awe as Sarah transformed their helicopter into the eye of a mechanical hurricane, with four supersonic aircraft spinning around them in carefully orchestrated chaos. She had turned their coordinated attack into a self-defeating tangle of conflicting flight paths. But the true revelation came when Sarah's voice cut through the radio frequency with words that changed everything the fighter pilots thought they knew about their opponent. Attention all aircraft, this is Colonel Sarah Chun, formerly of the Aggressor Squadron, Test Pilot Program. The lead fighter pilot's response carried stunned recognition. Aggressor Squadron? You're one of the pilots who taught us air-to-air combat tactics at Red Flag. Sarah's laugh returned, but now it carried the weight of revealed expertise. That's correct. I've been flying against fighters for 15 years before transitioning to helicopters. You gentlemen just received a masterclass in rotorcraft combat capabilities from someone who helped write the manual you trained from. The silence that followed was deafening. The fighter formation pulled back to safe distance as the full implications of Sarah's revelation sank in. The Aggressor Squadron represented the elite of air combat training, pilots who flew against every fighter type in the world to teach the next generation of aviators. Sarah hadn't just defeated them through luck or helicopter advantages. She had systematically dismantled their tactics using knowledge gained from years of aerial combat instruction. The lead pilot's voice carried newfound respect tinged with embarrassment. Colonel Chun, we were not informed of your background during this engagement. Our briefing indicated standard helicopter opposition. Sarah's response revealed the broader context that had shaped the entire encounter. This was an unscheduled training exercise. Gentlemen, your squadron requested advanced helicopter evasion scenarios, and command decided to provide authentic opposition without prior notification. Marcus finally understood why Sarah had seemed so confident throughout the engagement. She hadn't been fighting for survival. She had been conducting an advanced training exercise using real-world pressure to teach lessons that simulator training could never provide. The second fighter pilot transmitted with grudging admiration. Ma'am, we've never encountered helicopter tactics like those you demonstrated today. Is this standard Apache capability? Sarah's final lesson carried the authority of someone who had spent decades perfecting aerial combat instruction. Standard Apache capabilities exceeded your expectations because you were trained to fight yesterday's helicopters. Today's rotorcraft, in the hands of experienced pilots, represent threats that require completely new tactical approaches. The hunters had become students without realizing the classroom had changed around them. Ground Control's voice carried a mixture of relief and amazement as the situation resolved. All aircraft returned to base for debriefing. Colonel Chun, outstanding demonstration of advanced rotorcraft capabilities. The fighter formation reformed with newfound respect for the Apache that had systematically outmaneuvered them. Each pilot now understood that their training assumptions about helicopter vulnerabilities were dangerously outdated when facing skilled opposition. Sarah guided her aircraft toward home base as Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "Colonel, why didn't you tell me about your background before this mission?" Her response carried the wisdom of someone who had spent years teaching combat lessons through experience rather than theory. "Marcus, would you have learned the same lessons if you knew this was training? Real pressure creates real learning that no simulator can replicate." The lead fighter pilot transmitted one final message as the formation separated for landing. "Colonel Chun, thank you for the education. We'll be requesting follow-up training sessions with advanced helicopter opposition." Sarah's laugh returned, but now it carried warmth instead of tactical intimidation. "Anytime, gentlemen. There's always more to learn about what these machines can do in the right hands." As the Apache settled onto the landing pad, word spread quickly through the base about the legendary encounter. 4 fighter jets had met their match against a single helicopter pilot whose hidden expertise transformed a routine patrol into an unforgettable lesson in aerial combat evolution. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about your favorite moment or character, or tell us about someone you know who showed similar hidden expertise under pressure.